All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're jumping into one of the most chaotic and transformative periods in modern history, Britain during the first half of the 20th century. Think about it. It's a story of a global empire at the absolute height of its power, getting brought to its knees by war, only to have to completely rediscover itself in its darkest hour. So, let's get into it. So here's how we're going to break this all down. We're going to start with the incredible promise of a new century, then watch as the Great War takes a devastating toll. After that, we'll try to untangle the bitter division of Ireland, navigate the really strange years between the wars, and finally, stand with Britain during what was, without a doubt, its darkest and yet somehow finest hour. Okay, so let's set the scene. Picture it. It's the dawn of the 1900s, and Britain is, well, the top dog on the world stage. It's got this massive empire, an unbeatable navy, and industries that are just humming with power. There was this real feeling in the air, a sense that progress wasn't just possible, it was pretty much guaranteed. And this wasn't just wishful thinking. They were actually doing stuff. The government rolled out old age pensions and unemployment benefits, which was a totally radical idea back then. Kids were starting to get free meals at school, and new laws were making factories safer. And this is a big one. Members of parliament started getting a salary. Why does that matter? Well, it meant that for the first time ever, you didn't have to be some rich lord to get into politics. It really felt like they were building a better, fairer country from the ground up. But that whole era of hope and progress, it just came to a grinding, catastrophic halt. The assassination of an archduke in Sarajevo in 1914 was the spark, and it lit a fuse that just sent the whole world up in flames and completely shattered Britain's confidence. So this complicated web of alliances snapped tight, and it split the continent into two massive armed camps. You had the Allied powers, which included Britain and its empire, squaring off against the Central Powers. And that word empire is just so crucial here. This was not just some European squabble. Over 1 million soldiers from India alone fought for Britain, not to mention troops from Africa, the West Indies, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, you name it. It was a world war in every sense of the word. The sheer scale of the fighting was just something no one had ever imagined. 60,000. That's how many British casualties there were on the very first day of the Battle of the Somme. 60,000! An entire generation was just being swallowed by the mud in northern France. Now, Britain and its allies did win in 1918, but it was a victory that felt an awful lot like a defeat. With over 2 million casualties, that's men killed or wounded, the war left this deep, permanent scar on the nation. The world they knew in 1914, it was gone, forever. And just because the Great War ended, it didn't mean peace broke out everywhere. For Britain, the fight just moved closer to home. An issue that had been bubbling under the surface for centuries, Irish independence, finally exploded. After the Easter Rising in 1916 and a really brutal guerrilla war, a treaty was finally signed in 1921. But it was one of those compromises that made pretty much nobody happy. Ireland was split in two. 6 mainly Protestant counties in the north stayed with the UK, while the other 26 became the new, self-governing Irish Free State. This single act, this division, would cause conflict and pain for decades to come. The years that followed, between 1918 and 1939, were just full of these crazy contradictions. It was a time of massive hope and innovation living side by side with really profound hardship. A very strange time to be alive. So, on one hand, you have the Great Depression, which just slammed into Britain. It started in 1929 and absolutely wrecked the old, traditional industries like coal mining and shipbuilding. This led to massive unemployment and crushing poverty, especially up in the industrial north, Scotland and Wales. And yet, and this is the crazy part, at the exact same time, totally new industries were taking off. Things like aviation and car manufacturing were booming. By 1939, get this, there were 2 million cars on British roads. It's this powerful symbol of a brand new, modern way of life that was somehow emerging right in the middle of all that economic pain. And you saw this paradox everywhere. The BBC started its first radio broadcasts, connecting the whole nation in a completely new way. Then Britain launched the world's first ever regular TV service. You had new literary voices popping up, and the economist John Maynard Keynes was developing ideas that would literally reshape how we think about economics. It was just this burst of creativity against a backdrop of struggle. But of course, this complicated, fragile peace couldn't last. Over in Germany, Adolf Hitler's rise to power put Europe on a collision course back to war. And when Germany invaded Poland in 1939, Britain and France really had no choice. They declared war, and the world was plunged back into darkness. The first few years were a total disaster. By 1940, most of Europe had fallen to the Nazis, and Britain was left standing all alone. But under their new Prime Minister, Winston Churchill, the country decided to fight on. The Royal Air Force won the critical Battle of Britain, stopping a full-scale invasion. The entire nation then endured the horrifying bombing campaigns of the Blitz. And finally, with allies like the US and the Soviet Union, the tide began to turn, leading to the D-Day landings in 1944 and, at long last, victory in Europe a year later. And nothing really captures the feeling of that moment better than Churchill's own words. In the summer of 1940, when an invasion felt like it could happen any day, he went on the radio and broadcast his message of just pure, stubborn defiance to his people and to the entire world. And that defiance created something powerful, a national story. The Blitz spirit, along with the Dunkirk spirit, came to symbolize the incredible resilience of ordinary people just carrying on while bombs rained down every night. It's this idea of everyone pulling together and just refusing to be broken that really gets to the rebuilding part of our story today. It was a nation forging a brand new identity through shared sacrifice. So, in just 50 years, Britain went from being the confident hub of a global empire to a battered, bankrupt, but ultimately victorious island nation. The wars cost millions of lives and all of its wealth, but they also created a new understanding of what it meant to be British. Which really just leaves us with one last question to think about. What does it actually mean to be a victor when the price of winning is so unbelievably high?